Today, I'm going to answer some questions about organization. Hi, my name is Sarah, and welcome to my channel, which is all about sewing and styling a handmade wardrobe. This video is another installment of my mailbag series, where I answer the questions that you ask me in my community tab. I have a dedicated thread there where you can feel free to ask me any questions that I would be happy to answer in a future video. I will link that thread down in a pinned comment so you can easily find it should you have any questions that you would like to ask. So the first question comes from Beth Ann K, and her question is, any sewing room organization or layout tips? I'm looking for room ideas as I reestablish my sewing room, not over the top decorated sewing rooms, just what works for you or things you thought you'd like but didn't work. And of course, always love a good pet story. So my simple answer to this question is no, I don't have any organizational tips for you. The house where I'm currently living, we moved in 2009, and we never intended it to be our forever home. And because I've never cared about interior decorating, I never bothered to set up one of those really aesthetic sewing rooms, or really even a functional one, to be honest. Like, we still have a lot of furniture that we got from Goodwill when we were still in college, because for a long time we had a lot of pets. Like, at one time we had 5 pets, and so there was no point in having anything nice because the pets would just destroy it. So I guess I've always been putting off the idea of having a really tidy, customized, organized sewing room until we move into our forever home when I retire, and then I can concentrate on making the sewing room of my dreams. So I'm sorry, but I really just don't have anything to share with you. I've never done a sewing room tour, partly because honestly I think those videos are really boring, but also because I just don't have anything to share. So there you go, there's my little confession. I'm a messy person, I'm not very organized. So now that I've embarrassed myself, let's just move on from there. Oh, and the pet story. I did forget I did have a pet story. So even though we started out with 5 animals, we're down to the final boss. Penny is our last remaining animal. She's a very sweet dog, but she's really, really tuned to our emotions to the point where she kind of overreacts to them. Like, Penny is not a super intelligent dog, so she doesn't know a lot of tricks, but she knows a few. And whenever my husband gets upset, Penny will immediately go into the mode of doing like a sit pretty, because I think that she thinks that it's going to make him feel better because it's one of the only tricks that she knows. So she's like, look, I'm doing a trick, don't be mad anymore. And we're not talking about like rage or anything. Like, my husband might stub his toe or something and swear, and that's when she'll go into the like sitting pretty mode. So anyway, my husband and I are big Boston Celtics fans, and if you know anything about basketball, the Boston Celtics lost in the second round because our best player blew out his Achilles, and it was not the best end to this season. So while the playoffs were going on and things were not going well, there was a lot of emotional upheaval between me and my husband because we're really big fans. So poor Penny absolutely hates basketball season because we show so much emotion. And so whenever I would watch basketball games upstairs in the bedroom, Penny would be up there with me, and anytime I would express any sort of emotion at all, whether it was good or bad, she would take it as the need to comfort me. So she would like push up against me and try to cuddle me and roll over on her belly and try to show me her belly. And at the time, honestly, it's really pretty annoying because I'm just trying to watch a basketball game in peace. And God forbid I let out some sort of exclamation at any point because it just upsets her so much. I have to just sit there in silence and not have any reaction. But I do take it as like she's just trying to take care of us. And she tries so hard to cheer us up when she feels that we're being emotional. So I do appreciate it. She's our little emotional support animal. And believe me, no one is happier than Penny that the Celtics are no longer in the run for the championship this year. So the next question is from Mostly Knitting. She had a pretty long comment, so I'm going to edit a little bit. You mentioned you have a lot of patterns and that you have your wardrobe cataloged. How do you organize your patterns? My question regards both the physical patterns, which if printed take up so much space. I am also curious if you have them cataloged in a spreadsheet. I often get overwhelmed when I want to make something and try to match patterns with fabric in my stash and working out if things are a good fit and if I have enough fabric. Do you use any organizing tools like Notion or Evernote? So I did a video a few years ago now about how I organize my patterns in Trello, so I will link that video up in the cards and down in the description box if you want to check that out. I've been using that system for a few years now, and I would say that I'm pretty good about keeping up with it. Sometimes I'll kind of fall behind and I'll have like a stack of patterns that I haven't entered for a while, but I think for the most part I've kept it up to date. I do keep track as I go. When I actually sew a pattern, I will go in and mark it that I have sewn it and how many times so that I can filter and search. And it's really helpful when I'm doing a lot of my videos. Actually, I can go back and see which patterns I have actually made versus the ones which I haven't. So if you have the time, I do think that it's worth entering your patterns into a system like Trello or some other organizational system digitally. I find that very handy. Now, in terms of physical storage, as I said, I'm not very organized, so I'm not saying this is the best way to do it. But basically, I store my patterns in gallon-sized ziplocs. So I just fold up my paper patterns, put them in the ziploc, put a label on it and say what the pattern company is and what the pattern name is. Or if it's a big 5 pattern, I just put the pattern envelope in the front so you can see it. I don't bother with pictures of my indie patterns because I remember what most of them are just by the name. And then I just have some plastic storage like cubes that I put my envelopes in, and then I organize them by pattern company and then by pattern name, or by pattern company and then by number in the case of Big 5. So it's not the prettiest looking system, but it works well enough for me. I can usually find what I'm looking for. And I do try to purge maybe every year or so. I try to go through and pull out patterns that I've made that I didn't like and I know I'm never going to sew them again, just so that I'm not hanging on to them forever and ever. So that's how I organize my patterns both in the real world and in the digital world. And so I hope that's helpful to you. Mostly Knitting also had another question. Why do you turn off comments after a week? As a fellow YouTuber, I am curious about that. So I made a video at the very beginning of the year about burnout and how I've thought about quitting YouTube in the past because it just becomes too much sometimes. So I talked about it more in that video, but basically I turn off the comments after a week because they get really overwhelming. Like answering one person's comment is fine. Answering hundreds of comments gets really, really tiresome after a while. It's like that story about the guy who rolls the boulder up the hill and then every single day the boulder rolls back down and he has to start all over again. That's how it can feel sometimes with comments. So if I turn them off after a week, then that stops the flow of them. They can't keep coming because sometimes I'll get comments on really, really old videos and I have no idea what the person's talking about because I made that video years ago and I just don't have the time to go back and watch all my old videos to figure out what they're asking. And not for nothing, but I've also found that usually if there's going to be a nasty comment, it can sometimes be like a drive-by situation where someone will go by an old video and just say something really rude. So that eliminates that as well. So basically, I turn off the comments after a week in order to preserve my mental health, and I'm sorry if it's inconvenient for other people, but there are other ways of contacting me, like you can post a question in the questions thread if you have a burning question that you really just want me to answer. The last question is from Reed and Gold. Apologies if you've already covered this in depth and I just couldn't find it. I'd love to hear more about how you designed and use your clothing tracking spreadsheet. Some specific questions. What metrics interest you the most? How long have you been tracking? Did you discover any surprises through tracking, such as garments or categories that were more or less valuable in your wardrobe than you'd originally thought? So I use a Google Sheets spreadsheet. I've been tracking what I have owned and what I've been wearing since 2017. I make a copy of the spreadsheet every single year in January, and so I do track it year by year. And it's really nothing fancy. Like I would say what the garment is, when it entered my wardrobe, whether I made it or whether I purchased it. I track how many times that I've worn it in that calendar year. And I also track how many times that I've worn it in total. And I also track cost per wear. So some of the things that the spreadsheet has really helped me with is that I used to think that I wore certain things way more often than I actually do. Like I think that when you have statement pieces, they just stick out in your brain more and you remember the times that you wore them. So I would see like a fancy blouse or something and be like, oh yeah, I wear that all the time. But when I actually tracked the data, I realized that I wasn't wearing it nearly as much as I thought I was. And then similarly, the reverse is true. Things that I just don't even think about, I might wear them all the time, but they don't stick in my brain. So my most worn items by far in my wardrobe are my loungewear and my activewear because I have a kind of a limited amount of those items and I tend to wear the same pieces over and over and over again. So I don't even really talk about them on this channel because I just don't think that they're very interesting to talk about, but they are definitely my actual most worn pieces. And another category that I wear a lot is coats. I often need a coat, usually 3 seasons out of the year that I need to wear my coats. And I have a lot more coats than I used to because I made several recently. But back in the day when I didn't have that many, I would just wear the same ones over and over again. And so those have a very low cost per wear. So it's just interesting to think about the things that you think that you wear versus the things that you actually wear. I also think that a really valuable metric is cost per wear. I've realized certain things like making sweaters out of hand-dyed yarn or heritage breeds ends up being really, really expensive, and I just don't wear them enough to justify the cost. It's made me rethink that I just need to use cheaper yarns for sweaters because I'm just never going to wear that sweater enough to make it worth it. And when the new calendar year starts, I highlight the entire spreadsheet, like every item on the spreadsheet gets highlighted in purple. And then when I wear each item, I take away the purple highlight. So by the end of the year, the things that are still in purple, I know those are the things that I haven't worn at all during the year. And that actually helps me weed things out, whether I need to just get rid of those items or maybe refashion them in some way because I know that I'm not wearing them. So thank you so much to everyone who asked me a question this week. And don't forget, you can check out the pinned comment and ask me a question in the community tab if you have one. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.